Hello and welcome to My Dad the Bobby, episode 5. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 5 of My Dad the Bobby. Now, this episode is going to be really special. I don't have my dad sitting here with me this week, but we are going to be looking over my favourite moments and some of the best bits from My Dad the Bobby Series 1. But before we get into that, I have to do some very special thank yous. Firstly, thank you for my dad for taking part in this podcast. I've learned so much about him and it's been such a good experience, and for someone who didn't even know what a podcast was before we started recording, he certainly did a very good job of explaining everything properly and giving some great answers to all my questions, so thank you to my dad. Secondly, I want to say thank you to Jose Mendez, who made our wonderful theme music that you hear throughout the episode. And lastly, thank you to anyone who has been listening or has said nice things about our podcast. It really means a lot, so thank you very much. So let's go back to episode 1 when my dad explained everything he's done during his career as a police officer and private investigator. Okay, so Dad, firstly, do you want to introduce yourself and give us a little rundown of all the things you've done in your career?
Okay, well, I spent 30 years plus being a police officer of types. I actually joined as a police cadet in 1979, where I did a year before you actually become a police officer, a police constable in 1980. And the first 3 or 4 years, you do 2 years in probation, in uniform, and then you go into a uniform role. But actually, I only ever did 4 years in uniform. Mm-hmm. The rest of it, I was in different aspects of CID, so general CID office, dealing with burglary, thefts, robbery, etc. Then I moved on to the drug squad, did 2 or 3 years in there. Then I moved on to what we used to have in them days was regional crime squads. And I went to join the regional crime squad based at Milton Keynes, which was just basically a drugs wing dedicated to drug importation and serious crime. And then, won't give you the dates exactly, but I ended up working for the National Criminal Intelligence Service in London, where my role was quite unique in the respect that I was what they call an informant handler. So I would speak to people who wanted to give information. That would be for several reasons. They would either want financial reward, they would want the kudos of it, they would want to eliminate opposition, so you had to be very aware of that, what their motive was. But then I moved on to the major investigation team back in Cambridgeshire, back in Force, which was primarily dealing with murders, domestic murders or some quite high-profile murders. I worked on the Soham inquiry. You're too young to remember that really, but
Yeah.
The murder of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman in Soham. And my last 8 or 9 years was primarily dedicated to the investigation of murders within Cambridgeshire. But it was a great career, and I enjoyed it. I loved every day of it. It was good.
Thank you again to my dad so much for sharing that. I literally didn't even know half of those things that he did, so I definitely learned something from day one when we started this podcast. Okay, the next clip is going to be Dad talking about what it was like on the drug squad and the biggest find he ever did. And maybe as we're on the topic of the drug squad, could you talk a bit more about what this job was like and sort of all the different things you did? I mean, I would ask you to give a typical day in the life, but I imagine that's very varied and sort of every day was quite different. So maybe just a general list of things you did.
Well, again, this is so anecdotal because It's so long ago. You wouldn't believe this, but when I was on the drug squad, we used to bust people who had bits of cannabis in their pocket.
Yeah.
Arrest them and put them before the court, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know,
crazy.
And now the police are not even bothered. Well, I can't say that. I'm sure they are bothered, but you know, although it's illegal, the police don't really look at people with personalised bits of cannabis
Yeah.
because they do nothing else all their time.
Yeah.
Them and shoplifters, they'd have nothing else, you know. So it's moved on, you know, the powders now and the different types of drugs. I mean, I don't even know what some of these drugs are now.
Yeah.
You know, I've never seen crack cocaine, I don't think.
Yeah.
And I think when I was in the drug squad in about 1987, 86, 87, you know, if you found a wrap of coke or a wrap of heroin, it was rare, really rare. And now people are moving this stuff in ton containers, aren't they? And so it's developed. It's a different game to when I was in it. You know, I'm just an old bloke who retired and got war stories to tell, swinging the lamp. But no, the guys have a really difficult job now, and it's very technical now as well.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of specialist equipment deployed, and you know, it's no secret is it to tell people know that please look at your phones and everything because it's all over the TV in programs. They know what they do. But thankfully, the police always try and stay one step ahead.
Yeah.
And you hope they do because that's the only way you catch the bad guys.
So I was going to ask you actually, like you're obviously not going to be able to tell us specifics, but you sort of mentioned that it was quite rare to find a lot of drugs in these places. Do you remember a specific time when you found a lot and this was like quite a satisfying job because it was a lot of stuff?
For me, the biggest find I ever personally made was 25 kilos of amphetamine. Yeah, and I remember taking it to the property store in this massive great holder and how heavy it was.
Yeah.
But now, I mean, they deal with shiploads of it, don't they? And containers of it, and it's a different game now.
Yeah.
It's a different game. But that was the biggest find I personally ever found. I have been involved in interviewing people that have been found in possession of far more, but not personally having found it myself, no.
Right.
No.
Okay, so this next clip is from episode 3 of My Dad the Bobby, where Dad talks about police interviews. And in this clip, he's talking about what you do as a police officer if someone is saying no comment over and over and over. Take a listen. What do you do if someone is going no comment, no comment, no comment over and over? Like, you can continue asking those questions, but would you do anything else to try and get the answers out of them?
Well, you can. Obviously, you're aware. You should have done your homework and read the witness statements that relate to that person. How did you get that person in front of you, sitting in front of you? Something has led me to arrest them and put them in that chair, or someone else has arrested and brought them in the chair. We haven't just dragged him off the street on a night. There is something that has linked us to believe he or she is responsible. So obviously you can put that evidence to them. You know, you were seen by a witness leaving the house or getting into a car, or, you know, we've searched your house and we found this bag of drugs, or, you know, we've seized your clothing, and from that broken window we've found fragments of glass in your trousers, or, you know, because with every crime, as soon as you're at a scene, if you're touching something or in the vicinity of a scene, somewhere along there will be some forensic evidence on you, whether it be glass fragments, paint fragments off of a car, hairs, human hairs, dog hairs, animal hairs. There is some kind of contact. There will be forensic evidence on you. And in this day and age, forensics is so good. It's so good that if there's a human hair on your clothing that puts you at the scene, they will find it. Yeah. They will find it. So, yeah, so you put all that to them. You still get people go no comment when it's black and white. Yeah. You know, they'll swear black's white. Yeah. But that's fine. That's fine. And I always used to say to them, I hear what you're saying, but it's not me you've got to convince. Yeah. It's the court. I don't care what you say to me because I don't believe you anyway. Yeah. But I don't care what you say. It's not going to make a slightest bit of difference to my day. Yeah. But you've got to convince the court that what you're saying, you're going to hope they believe you. Yeah. And if it was so outrageous, they used to sit and say no comment or whatever, or it wasn't me there. I mean, you'll be working at the cop like you have done in the past. You'll see people in shoplifting, CCTV, theft, shoplifting. You'll see them on CCTV. It's them.
It's black and white.
It's black and white,
Yeah.
and they'll sit in there and say, "It's not me."
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. We'll charge you and we'll let the court decide.
Yeah.
That's the way it works.
Yeah. Okay, so this next clip is a little bit more serious. Obviously, my dad had to deal with some horrible, awful things in the police, and this next clip in particular does talk about child abuse, unfortunately. So this is your warning. If you're not comfortable with that, please click away now. But this is my dad talking about the worst people he's ever interviewed. And in terms of interviewing people, what did you find was the most difficult type of person to interview? Is there anything that sticks out that you go, oh, this type of person or with this personality made them really difficult to interview, or this wasn't a nice interview?
I was never good. I didn't do this very often, but I was never very good and didn't want to interview child sex offenders.
Yeah.
Because for me personally, it's too
emotional.
And
upsetting.
and at the time, you and your brother were quite young.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. I just couldn't. I didn't want to do it, and I told the bosses I didn't want to do it. And in fact, we now have specialised officers that do it.
Yeah.
And a lot of those haven't got children.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So they can probably distance themselves emotionally from it. But with your average, let's face it, 80% of them, 85, 90% would be males.
Yeah.
In fact, I do recall interviewing one woman who stabbed her husband to death. Other than that, I don't remember interviewing another woman for murder, but I've interviewed numerous male people.
Yeah.
So I didn't have any problems interviewing people for serious crime.
Yeah.
And it didn't weigh heavy on my mind either. And when people used to say to me, how do you deal with it when you get home, and how do you switch off? I never really had that.
Yeah.
It's like, well, this is my job, this is what I do. I'm going home, I'm going to bed, and then I'm going to get up and I'm going to do it again.
Yeah.
But I have in the past, long time ago, tried to interview sex offenders, and it's not my bag, it's not what I enjoy. No. I find I can't, emotionally, it's too difficult.
Yeah, it's too awful.
It's too awful to do it, and so there's other people that are far better at it than me. And the bosses in the police, they're not, they're realists. The people don't want to do certain things, and there are people, they put the best people in, which is good, which is where it should be, professional.
Okay, so in contrast to what we've just heard, here is a clip of Dad talking about the nicest murderer he's ever met.
Not many people come and say, yes, it was me, I did do it, and I'm guilty.
Yeah.
I'm not going to mention any names, but I did actually interview a guy. I've just got to be careful how I word this, not to give the guy away. I did interview a guy who attacked his wife and mother-in-law with a hammer. The mother-in-law died. The wife did survive. But he was a Christian, and he came in and admitted it straight away and said he was guilty.
Oh my gosh.
And he gave us every in-depth detail about how he did it and how he planned it.
Oh my God.
And the interview, it was the shortest. He was actually, I always said, he was the nicest murderer I've ever met.
Yeah.
Because he just came in, was sobbing, so upset, gave all tell us everything we need to know. And it was a really short interview because you didn't really have to ask him that many questions.
Wow.
The only thing to ask was, did you intend to do it? And if once he said, yes, I did intend to do it and I did intend to murder them, case proven, intent.
Yeah. And that was simply just because he had such guilt and because of his faith as well.
Because of his faith and because of his guilt and the circumstances he had been put in by his own wife and family. And it was a long time of frustration. I can't say too much because it will become obvious, or it could become obvious who that is, and that wouldn't be fair. But and he would have received a life sentence, but with a minimum. They would have a tariff. The judge gives them a tariff for example. So when the only sentence you can give for murder by statute is life imprisonment. But that's when you see, by statute, they can also give you a lesser term, a minimum tariff. So, I don't know, 17 years, 15 years or whatever. Yeah, that was a difficult one. It was interesting, but I did actually feel quite sorry for him.
Yeah.
It was so through frustration that he did it. And he was actually a very articulate guy who's got 3 degrees in different skills. He's a very clever man. Very clever man. And actually, I know this sounds weird, he's a really nice man.
Yeah.
But he was pushed beyond the edge and attacked his mother-in-law and wife.
Oh my goodness. And I suppose that also doesn't happen very often, so it's sort of a shock when it does happen that you almost feel sorry for someone in that setting or scenario.
Yeah. I mean, most murders are done by someone who knows the victim.
Yeah.
There's not a particularly high percentage of murders that take place by someone who's unknown to them. It can be gang-related, drug-related, domestic-related, family stuff, pride, whatever. So most murders are committed by someone who knows them. But there are the odd person you have a certain amount of sympathy and empathy for, and he was definitely one of them. And he was, if I was to see him here now, I'd happily shake his hand and talk to him because he's actually a nice human being.
Yeah.
But that was the way it was.
Moving on to episode 4, here's a clip of Dad talking about all the different roles and all the different things that need to be done in the police when you're solving cases. Okay, so moving on to Lucifer, which is set in the US, so again, it might be slightly further away.
I don't think I've seen Lucifer.
No?
I don't comment on it. No, have I? I don't think so.
It's okay. I'll just tell you the assumptions that people might make. You don't really need to see it.
Okay.
So one assumption is that police will often source outside help, such as other private investigators or different people to help with the investigations.
Well, they do outsource to specialists, like what do they call them? Forensic psychologists, criminologists. If you're looking for someone who you don't know who you're looking for, you need to have someone that can give you the type of person you're looking for.
Profiler.
Psychopaths and profiler. What type of person you're looking for. And I remember being on a couple of murders where those specialists were called in. And also, you get experts forensically you get people that can they can examine things like, dentistry is one of them.
Yeah.
They can tell if you just find a skull, they can try and identify, can tell you whether black, white, male, female.
Yeah.
So all the time the police are outsourcing to other things. And also I remember doing a murder in a prison where you used digital analysts to go into the prison and scan it with lasers and form a picture of who would have been where and what distance it was and who could have been in possession of the knife and all this. So there's lots of external contractors that get used. People who clean crime scenes.
Yeah.
After, there's lots of blood and contamination there. You get specialist companies who do that. What's that comedian, the big guy? He does that in he goes to crime scenes and cleans it all up. Great big comedian. Greg Davies. Yeah. He does a series. Yeah, look it up on the...
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's funny. It's good.
Yeah.
It's good. Light-hearted stuff. But the police recruit all sorts of experts from outside. People who examine soil. So, for example, if you find tyre tracks in soil and then you find a car with mud on the tyres, they can forensically link that type of soil to the soil where the crime scene was.
That's what they did in the Sower murders, wasn't it?
It was. Yeah. They did use them, yeah. We used a lot of experts for the Sower murders, a lot of experts in different fields.
Yeah. It's really interesting to hear there's so many different job roles that the police commonly use, and you need experts for absolutely everything to paint this bigger picture, but
you do,
it's very interesting.
Definitely. I mean, for example, that forensically on the Sower murders, that house, the bungalow where the caretaker lived, that was stripped brick by brick.
Really?
Plaster taken off the walls, the plug sockets taken out, the light fittings removed.
Yeah.
His car was just stripped. Every
Yeah.
single item was stripped. It's just a shell. So, yeah, there's loads of experts used from outside, but they're obviously not working with the police all the time. That's their specialist field, and when we call on them, they're there.
Yeah. And finally, I had to include the Tower Bridge story. This was one of my favourite stories growing up, and I remember Dad telling this to me when I was younger, so I had to include this one. Take a listen. Alright, so the next one is Miami Vice, which
Yeah.
I've never seen,
Brilliant.
but you
Crogs
will
and
have.
Tuppet.
Oh God. Okay, so the
Crockett and
first
Tubbs
question,
even.
when I imagine you driving around,
Yeah.
I think you thought you were in Miami Vice sometimes.
It's brilliant. Brilliant.
So one of the assumptions is that detectives drive around in really nice cars and wear linen suits, and it's all very flash.
Well, I can end that myth straight away because they were in Miami,
Yeah.
and 9 times out of 10 I was in Peterborough. But no, I did a lot while working in London. I did a lot of work in work in London, and I do remember an incident on Tower Bridge where we were following a guy who got a kilo of heroin in the boot of his car,
I love this story.
and he wouldn't stop, and we had 6 surveillance cars on them, and ideally, what used to happen, ideally in an ideal world, you call in a marked traffic car to stop that vehicle and search it because you don't want to blow out the surveillance team
Yeah.
and you want to protect your surveillance vehicles. But with that one, he just wasn't stopping for anyone.
Yeah.
So in the end, we rammed him on the middle of Tower Bridge, closed Tower Bridge, and jumped out and put a baseball bat through the windscreen because he wouldn't unlock the car, and dragged him out through the screen, and we recovered a kilo of heroin.
Oh my God.
But in that instant, there were 6 of our vehicles damaged. And when the boss rang me in the morning, he said, "How did you get on last night?" I said, "Well, do you want the good news or the bad news?" He said, "Well, give me the good news." I said, "Well, the good news is we got him. He's in custody down in London, Paddington." I said, "I've got a kilo of smack back." And he said, "What's the bad news?" I said, "I've damaged 6 of your cars." He said, "Oh, well, these things happen." So,
Got away with that one then. Okay, so that's the end of our Best Bits episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that if you've listened to the series, you enjoyed that as well. Thank you once again for my dad for being part of this. Thank you to Jose for making the theme music. Thank you to the audience. If you'd like to get in touch, you can email us at mydadthebobby@gmail.com or find us on Instagram at mydadthebobby. Bye!